I arrived in Manhattan on a bright spring morning, the streets alive with honking horns and the hum of a city that never sleeps. I had been called for an interview at one of the tallest glass and steel towers near Bryant Park. A dream job, the kind that seemed to promise escape from obscurity. My reflection followed me in the mirrored doors, too polished, too eager, as though I barely belonged. The lobby was vast and white, the smell of disinfectant sharp in the air, as if it were less an office than a hospital. The guards didn't smile, their eyes scanned each face as though measuring threats. Elevators swallowed people in polished steel jaws and shot them upward. I stepped inside one, clutching my folder, and felt the weight of the city pressing down, even as I rose. But by the time I reached the 11th floor, the first signs of wrongness began. A man stood in the hallway outside the offices, his shirt damp with sweat. He gasped as if drowning in air, clutching at the white walls. Another employee bent over him, whispering urgently, "It's the fumes, you smell it, don't you?" But I smelled nothing beyond the sterile sting of cleaning fluid. The receptionist assured me it was nothing, just a fainting spell, but I noticed her hands trembling as she dialed the phone. The sound of typing filled the air, too fast, too frantic, as though every keyboard in the office was a heartbeat about to burst. I told myself it was nerves, that every big city has its strange moments. Yet as I sat in the waiting room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something invisible coiled through the walls, threading its way into my lungs. And somewhere beyond the elevator doors, a voice, faint, almost like a child's, laughed, then cut off into a cough. The receptionist finally guided me deeper into the building, her heels clicking against the tile in a rhythm that seemed far too loud in the long white corridors. Every surface gleamed. Walls, floors, even the air itself seemed scrubbed raw, the sharp tang of antiseptic never loosening its grip. We passed open offices where clusters of workers hunched over screens, faces pale in the artificial glow. A low buzz filled the air, not only the lights and machines but something else, something that seemed to crawl beneath the sound, like a whisper buried in static. I told myself to focus, to remember why I was here. This was opportunity. This was progress. This was the future I had chased since childhood. But then we reached the 15th floor. The elevator doors slid open, and instantly the air was different. Thick, heavy, as though the oxygen had been wrung dry. People stood clustered in the hallway, not working, not speaking, only staring at one another. Their eyes darted like frightened animals. A young woman stumbled out of a cubicle, clutching her stomach. She gagged, her face gray, then collapsed to her knees. A man rushed forward, but instead of helping, he bent over himself, gasping as if invisible fingers were tightening around his throat. The smell hit me then, not chemical, not smoke, but something sharper, like metal scraped against stone. I pressed a sleeve to my nose, but the odor clung inside my head. The receptionist hissed, "Keep walking," and pulled me past the scene. But I couldn't keep my eyes from wandering. I saw hands trembling against glass partitions. Lips moving in prayer. A man banging his head rhythmically against a white wall, whispering, "Out, out, out." When we entered another wing, the lights flickered. For a breathless second, everything went dark, and in that darkness I heard it. Children. Laughing. Coughing. Singing off-key. Then the lights returned, and the corridor was empty. The receptionist's grip on my arm tightened. "Ignore it," she whispered, though her own lips were trembling. "It passes." But did it? We reached a conference room where other candidates sat waiting, their faces pale, their hands gripping folders like talismans. No one spoke. The silence pressed against the glass walls, heavier than the city noise far below. From the corridor came another sound, a low murmur, many voices rising together, impossible to make out yet unmistakably urgent. I leaned closer to the glass. For an instant, I thought I saw shapes moving down the hallway, too tall and too thin to be human, gliding just beyond the flicker of the fluorescent lights. When I blinked, there was nothing. But my heart was hammering, and in my lungs, the air felt thinner, poisoned, stolen. Somewhere far above us, another floor erupted in screams. The screams above lingered long after they had ceased, reverberating through the bones of the tower as though the steel itself carried them. We sat frozen in the conference room, a handful of strangers pretending to be candidates, professionals, future employees. But our eyes betrayed us, wide, bloodshot, darting to the glass walls and the fluorescent hum overhead. I told myself to stand, to leave, to find the elevator and vanish back onto the streets where life at least felt human. But instead, I rose slowly, my legs carrying me toward the door as though pulled by something unseen. The receptionist had disappeared. The other candidates said nothing as I slipped out into the hallway. The floor was deserted. The antiseptic brightness of the lights had turned sour, every bulb buzzing too loud, too close. My shoes squeaked against the tiles, each step amplified into the silence. When I reached the elevators, the panel flickered. Numbers climbed, 171819. I pressed the button, but the doors refused to open. Instead, the panel blinked once more, 20. Then silence. A stairwell waited at the end of the hall. I should have gone down, back to safety. But my hand gripped the rail and pulled me upward, one floor, then another. The 16th floor. The air grew colder. Offices stood abandoned, chairs overturned. Coffee dripped endlessly from a machine into an overflowing cup. On one desk lay a folder soaked through with water, though no leak was visible above. The pages inside were blank, each one warped, curling inward like dead skin. The 17th floor. Here the smell changed. No longer antiseptic. It was thicker, medicinal, as though a hospital ward had been grafted onto the tower. White corridors stretched out, their walls lined with stretchers. A man lay on one, eyes open but unfocused, whispering something between coughs. His lips moved to a rhythm, but no sound came out. As I leaned closer, I realized his chest wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. And yet, the whisper continued. I stumbled backward, nearly falling against the door to the stairwell. My heart hammered. I told myself I was hallucinating, that the air was thinner here, that my brain was inventing visions. But the whisper followed me as I climbed again. The 18th floor. Here, the walls were glass. Beyond them, the city stretched in all directions, but wrong, warped. Streets curved where they should nt. Buildings bent inward like ribs of a giant beast. And between them, moving shapes, thousands of people walking, yet their heads all tilted back, mouths open in silent screams. I pressed a hand to the glass. Cold, solid, real. But when I blinked, the shapes were gone. Only Manhattan lay beneath, glittering, indifferent. The 19th floor. The lights flickered violently, and in each stutter of darkness, the hallway filled with figures. They stood shoulder to shoulder, faces obscured, watching. When the light returned, the hall was empty, but the smell lingered, sweat, iron, damp fabric. I rushed up another flight, desperate to escape. The 20th floor. Silence. No flicker of lights. No whisper. Just a vast open floor, rows of cubicles stretching into shadow. Each desk perfectly ordered, pens aligned, phones silent, papers stacked. But every chair was turned outward, facing the hallway, as though waiting for me. My throat tightened. I could no longer tell if the air was poisoned or if fear itself had thickened it. Then, from deep in the cubicles, a cough. Dry, ragged. Followed by another. And another. Voices rose, dozens of them, whispering, chanting, coughing, blending into something that was neither human nor mechanical, but a rhythm. A rhythm like breathing. I turned and fled back to the stairwell, clutching the rail as though it were a lifeline. My chest ached, my skin slick with sweat, but I climbed again, higher still, as though drawn toward some terrible summit. The tower groaned around me, alive, each floor another lung, another vein. And I knew then, I was not walking through a building. I was walking inside something vast, something sick, something that was feeding on us all. And still, I climbed. I reached the 21st floor gasping, half certain my lungs would burst. The stairwell had narrowed, the walls damp as though the concrete itself was sweating. The antiseptic sting of the lower floors had given way to something richer, sourer, the unmistakable odor of rot dressed in perfume. The hallway was lined with glass walls. Offices stretched outward, each one lit too brightly, yet empty. As I walked, my own reflection stalked me, repeating my steps, my hesitations. My breath fogged the glass, but the reflections did not. They stared back at me with steady eyes, unblinking. Then, suddenly, one of them moved. Not mine. A girl, no, a woman, though young, was inside the reflection, sitting on the edge of a glass desk. Her hair dark, her eyes pale, her hands clutching a notebook. When I turned toward the office, it was empty. But in the reflection, she remained, watching me. "Don't go higher," she said. Her voice didn't pass through the air but through the glass itself, vibrating against my skull. I froze. What's happening in this building? Her pale mouth curved into something not quite a smile. Poison. Or gas. Or maybe nothing at all. Maybe it's only in your head. That's how it begins. She stood, her reflection moving though the room itself stayed empty. They want you to climb. But the higher you go, the less of you remains. Her words coiled inside me. I pressed a hand against the glass, desperate to bridge the impossible distance. My reflection trembled beneath my fingers, but hers pressed back, cold and sharp. "Come down," she whispered. "There are others. In the park. It's worse there." The word worse lodged in me like a shard. Before I could speak, the lights above flickered, a rapid stutter, and in each blink she drew nearer, until her face was inches from mine, separated only by glass. Her eyes were wide, frantic, the pupils dilated into emptiness. "Choose," she hissed. "Up or down. But don't linger here." The lights steadied. The reflection was mine again. Empty offices stared back at me, lifeless and still. But when I turned toward the stairwell, she was there, not reflection, but flesh and bone, leaning against the wall, breathing hard. The same pale eyes, the same notebook clutched in her trembling hand. "You saw it too," I whispered. She nodded once. "They call it hysteria. But tell me, does hysteria leave bruises?" She pulled back her sleeve. Dark marks ringed her wrist, like the imprint of unseen fingers. My throat went dry. "What is this? Gas? Radiation?" Her laugh cracked like glass under pressure. "Or maybe a curse. Haven't you noticed? It spreads like belief. The more you talk about it, the more it takes root. That's why they won't admit it. Not the doctors. Not the police. Not the suits who built this tower." I wanted to deny her, to cling to reason, to tell her she was only feeding the hysteria she feared. But my body betrayed me, lungs straining, sweat dripping, pulse racing like a trapped animal. We fled downward together, each step an echo in the hollow stairwell. The tower moaned around us, steel shifting like ribs expanding with a breath. The walls vibrated with faint coughs, with whispers threading the silence. By the time we reached the lobby, the city outside felt no safer. The glass doors opened onto Bryant Park, green and alive, but the sound that met us was not laughter or conversation. It was coughing. Hundreds of voices, rising and falling in jagged rhythm, like the city itself had caught an invisible infection. The girl's hand gripped mine, icy cold. "I told you. It's worse here. And as we stepped into the park, the world tilted, skyscrapers bending inward, the grass rippling though there was no wind, and every tree swaying as if something unseen perched among the branches. The park should have been a reprieve. A wide field of grass, children chasing pigeons, businessmen eating hurried lunches, joggers cutting paths through sunlight and shade. But as we stepped from the skyscraper's glass jaws, the city air tasted wrong. It was heavy, metallic, as though invisible wires were strung between each breath. My throat tightened with the first inhale. The girl beside me, her name still unknown, winced, clutching her notebook tighter against her chest. At first, it was only a few. A man on a bench doubled over, clutching his stomach. A woman jogging slowed, her pace broken, before collapsing on her knees. Children stopped their play and began to cough, the sound rising like a chorus of small, ragged violins. Within minutes, the park rippled with panic. Dozens fell where they stood, gasping for air, eyes rolled back, bodies twitching. Others screamed, not words, only raw fear torn from their throats. Parents grabbed their children, dragging them toward the edges, only to stumble themselves. The smell arrived then, stronger than anything in the skyscraper. Sharp, acrid, layered with the sweetness of something rotting. It was everywhere at once, as though the very earth beneath the park exhaled it. Gas, I whispered. It had to be. Some leak, some chemical hidden beneath the city. But the girl shook her head violently. No. Listen. The coughing, the screams, yes, but beneath them something else. A rhythm, faint but insistent, threading through the chaos like a drumbeat. Not mechanical, not natural. Human. Voices murmuring in unison, too low to understand. It's not gas, she said. Her eyes gleamed feverishly. It's belief. It's contagion of the mind. Contagion doesn't choke you, I snapped, my lungs burning, my chest constricting. This is chemical. A weapon. Someone's doing this. She only shook her head again, almost smiling through the sweat dripping down her pale face. You're already caught. Don't you feel it? The more you think about it, the deeper it roots itself. Around us, the crowd split into factions. Some screamed that terrorists had released poison into the air. Others shouted of curses, of divine punishment, of invisible plagues sent to scour the city. People fought over bottles of water, over scraps of cloth to cover their mouths. Ambulances arrived, sirens wailing, but the moment paramedics stepped into the park, they faltered too. Some dropped their stretchers and clutched at their throats. Others backed away, eyes wild with the same panic. I stumbled toward the fountain at the park's center, desperate for clarity, for oxygen. The water shimmered strangely, as though lit from below, rippling though no coin disturbed it. I bent close, hoping for cool relief. But reflected in its surface was not my face. It was hers. The girl, the same pale eyes, the same trembling lips, but speaking words I couldn't hear, her reflection mouthing faster and faster until the water itself seemed to vibrate. I reeled back, nearly falling. The girl caught me, her grip like iron despite her thin frame. You saw it, she whispered. You saw me where I wasn't. That's how it begins. Around us, the park had become a battlefield. People convulsed on the grass, foam flecking their lips. Others tore at their clothes, swearing their skin was burning. Some simply wandered in circles, whispering prayers, their eyes unfocused. And still, the rhythm pulsed beneath it all, growing louder, more insistent. A chant without words. A heartbeat not our own. I pressed my hands to my ears, but it seeped through, rising in my skull. My vision blurred, the skyscrapers around the park bending inward again, their glass faces glinting like teeth. The girl leaned close, her breath hot against my ear. This is only the beginning. The tower feeds it. The city spreads it. And you, Her voice broke, trembling. You can't leave now. None of us can. Somewhere in the chaos, a child screamed. High, sharp, endless. And when it finally broke into silence, the whole park seemed to breathe as one. We fled the center of the park, stumbling through bodies writhing in the grass, through parents clutching limp children, through strangers clawing at each other for air that wasn't there. The fountain's shimmer still pulsed behind my eyes. The girl led me to the park's edge, toward a row of white medical tents hastily erected. Inside, doctors and nurses barked orders, their voices taut with strain. The smell of rubbing alcohol mixed with sweat and vomit, a nauseating fog that clung to every surface. Stretchers lined the corridor, children strapped down, their small chests heaving. Monitors beeped in frantic rhythms, but the numbers on their screens seemed wrong, too fast, too erratic, as if the machines themselves were infected. One doctor shoved past me, shouting for more oxygen tanks. Another collapsed mid-stride, clutching his throat, eyes bulging, foam flecking his lips. Nurses swarmed him, but their hands trembled, their masks slipping. This is chemical, I said, turning to the girl. My voice cracked with desperation. It has to be. Some kind of attack. A leak from the subway tunnels. A nerve agent. There's no other explanation. Her pale eyes caught the flicker of fluorescent lights. You still don't see it. Chemicals don't spread through glass. They don't whisper through walls. They don't show you your own reflection speaking words you can't hear. That was in my head, I snapped, though even as I said it, doubt chewed at me. A hallucination. Because of the gas. Her laugh was sharp, brittle. Yes. A hallucination. And yet I saw it too. And so did others. We share the same hallucinations, the same screams, the same bruises. She pulled back her sleeve again, showing me the dark marks on her wrist, deeper now, almost black. If this is poison, then explain this. I had no words. We argued in hushed tones, our voices barely audible over the chaos around us. She insisted it was hysteria, a psychic contagion, something that infected minds first and bodies later. I clung to reason, to science, to the safety of explanations that could be measured and contained. But reason was slipping. Everywhere I looked, faces mirrored my fear. Parents wept over children who breathed in shallow gasps. Teenagers convulsed, their limbs jerking in unnatural rhythms, as if dancing to a music no one else could hear. Adults collapsed against walls, eyes rolled back, mouthing silent words. And above it all, yes, even here in the tents, that low rhythm persisted. A chant without language. A heartbeat not our own. I pressed my hands to my temples. The girl grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. You feel it too, she whispered. Admit it. It's not poison. It's belief. The city itself is infected. I wrenched free, panting. And if you're wrong? If it really is poison, and we waste time on superstitions, how many die? Her gaze sharpened. And if you're wrong? If this isn't chemical but something deeper, then you've already lost. Because you've let it inside your head. A stretcher rolled past us. A boy no older than 12 thrashed violently, his mouth foaming. His eyes locked on mine, and in a voice that didn't sound like his own, he rasped, "It waits." The words froze me. The doctors restrained him, forcing an oxygen mask over his face, but the echo lingered. The girl leaned close, whispering in my ear, "Tell me again it's only gas." And though my mouth formed the words, no sound emerged. Because deep inside, beneath my fear, beneath my reason, something had already taken root. By nightfall, the park was a battlefield wrapped in floodlights. Police cordoned the streets, their barricades flimsy against the flood of panicked parents, reporters, and onlookers who surged forward, demanding answers. The sound of sirens looped endlessly, weaving into the city's heartbeat. I stood with the girl just beyond the medical tents, the glow of TV cameras painting the scene in sickly light. Reporters shouted into microphones, their words carried live into homes across the country. Unidentified gas, possible terrorist attack, mass hysteria. Each anchor repeated the same phrases, yet none of them matched what I had seen. None dared whisper of reflections, speaking, or bruises without touch. Helicopters hovered above, blades chopping the night into jagged rhythms. Their spotlights cut across the park, freezing scenes in snapshots. A child convulsing on a stretcher, a woman clawing at her throat, a priest kneeling in the grass, his arms outstretched as though he could exorcise the entire city. Every snapshot seemed staged, rehearsed, as though the city itself were putting on a play. The girl tugged my sleeve. "They're lying," she said, her voice almost lost in the roar. "They know it's not gas. But they can't say what it really is. Because if they name it, it spreads faster." I shook my head, though I couldn't stop watching the news crews. "They have to explain it somehow. People need answers. Answers are poison," she whispered. A sudden commotion erupted near the barricades. A woman pushed past police, screaming that her daughter was still inside the park. She clawed at the officers, her shrieks rising into pure animal terror. When they tried to restrain her, she collapsed, writhing on the pavement, foam bubbling at her lips. Cameras swarmed, capturing every second, as if her suffering were just another headline. The crowd's fear surged higher. Shouts broke out, "It's chemical warfare. It's a curse. They're testing us like rats." The air pulsed with accusation, every voice feeding the next. Police shouted back, their batons raised, but I could see it in their faces, they felt it too. The tremor in their hands, the sweat dripping beneath riot helmets. Whatever was happening in the park had already spread beyond it. Screens mounted on vans replayed the day's chaos in endless loops. Footage of children fainting, of office workers collapsing, of stretchers rolling into ambulances. Each replayed image seemed louder, sharper, like the city was trying to etch the panic into itself. And underneath, faint but growing, I heard it again, the rhythm. Not in my head now, but in the crowd. People stomping, shouting, coughing in sync, without realizing. A chant without words pulled from every throat. The girl gripped my arm. "Do you hear it?" I nodded, throat dry. "Then you know it isn't gas." Her eyes gleamed feverishly. "This is belief taking shape. It feeds on us. On our fear. Every broadcast, every headline, every scream, it makes it stronger." I wanted to deny her. I wanted to cling to science, to the safety of numbers and evidence. But the city was unraveling before my eyes, and reason was drowning in the tide. On the big screen across the street, a news anchor's face froze mid-sentence. The feed stuttered, then warped. For a moment, his mouth moved without sound. His eyes rolled upward, whites gleaming. Then the screen went black. The crowd screamed. Some ran, others surged forward. And over it all, like thunder rolling through the skyscrapers, a child's cry rang out, too loud, too long, impossible to come from human lungs. The girl turned to me, her voice almost reverent. "It's awake." By dawn, Manhattan was no longer itself. I walked streets that should have been alive with taxis and rushing suits, but instead they pulsed with chaos. Offices emptied into sidewalks, crowds clutching their heads, their throats, stumbling as though dragged by invisible wires. Apartment doors slammed open, families poured out half-dressed, eyes wide, voices shrill with panic. The city was a body unraveling, block by block. On 42nd Street, traffic had frozen into gridlock. Horns blared, drivers screamed, but then one by one, they slumped against their wheels. Engines roared unattended, smoke rising, while people clawed their way out of cars and collapsed on the asphalt. Sirens tried to cut through the noise, but ambulances barely moved, paramedics spilling into the streets like the rest, masks dangling uselessly at their sides. I could smell it everywhere now, metallic, acrid, mixed with sweat and blood. It coated my tongue, made each swallow burn. The girl and I pressed ourselves against the side of a building, watching the tide sweep past. She was pale, her lips trembling, but her eyes never left the crowd. "Do you see?" she said. "This isn't poison. It's a pattern. A rhythm. They breathe together, move together, fall together. A city becoming one body." I wanted to argue, but the sight silenced me. Hundreds shuddering in unison, as if caught in the same invisible current. Their coughs rose and fell together, their convulsions rippling down the street like a wave. From somewhere above, glass shattered. I looked up. High in a skyscraper window, a figure pressed both palms to the glass. Their face smashed against it, mouth open in a silent scream. Then another face appeared beside it. And another. Dozens, pressed like insects, their bodies writhing against the glass until it buckled and broke. Shards rained down. The crowd below shrieked and scattered, but not far. Moments later, they stopped and turned back, as though pulled by strings. Their eyes rolled, their lips moving in whispers I couldn't hear. The girl clutched my arm. "It's not hysteria anymore. It's possession." I swallowed hard, my throat raw. "By what?" She shook her head, eyes glassy. "Not who. What? The city itself." We ran. Past Bryant Park, now a field of bodies. Past Times Square, its giant screens flickering with static and warped faces that mouthed words without sound. Past rows of shuttered shops, their windows vibrating with the same low chant I could feel in my bones. Everywhere, people argued. Poison, gas, terrorism, curse. Their words blended into screams, but none mattered. The sickness spread faster than any explanation. By the time we reached the East River, the sun was rising. Its light fell cold and gray, reflecting off water that churned without wind. People lined the banks, staring blankly into the ripples. Some waded in fully clothed, walking until the current pulled them under. I grabbed the girl's hand, dragging her back. My heart pounded, every breath a struggle. The rhythm was in me now, pounding through veins, tightening around ribs. I turned to her, desperate. "Tell me how to stop it." She only shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "You can't. You can only carry it. And once you do, it never leaves." Her words cut through me like glass. Because I already knew she was right. I could feel it in my lungs, in my bones, in the space behind my eyes. It was no longer outside. It was inside. And the city, my city, our city, was falling with me. We found shelter in a hospital near the river, or what remained of one. The lobby was littered with abandoned stretchers, IV bags dripping onto the floor, oxygen tanks tipped over like fallen soldiers. The white corridors smelled of bleach and copper, and the fluorescent lights hummed as if alive. Every sound echoed too long, as if the walls themselves were repeating what they heard. Inside the waiting room, a handful of survivors huddled together. Parents cradled children who twitched in uneasy sleep, their lips whispering words that weren't their own. Nurses whispered over empty clipboards, their hands trembling too much to write. A priest held a rosary that shook like a pendulum, his prayers breaking into coughs. The girl and I slipped into a corner, our backs against the cold plaster. For the first time since the skyscraper, I let my body collapse. My chest heaved, lungs burning with every breath, as though something heavier than air filled them. And then I realized, the building itself was breathing. Not metaphor. Not imagination. I could hear it. The ventilation sighing in rhythm with my pulse. The walls creaking like ribs expanding. Every light flicker timed with the beat beneath my skin. The girl leaned closer. "You feel it too?" I nodded, unable to speak. In the hallway, a doctor barked orders at no one. Saline, oxygen, restraints. His voice cracked, echoing off tile. When no one answered, he slammed his fist against the wall and froze. His knuckles left no bruise, the wall's surface rippled like flesh. He backed away, muttering prayers before collapsing to his knees. The priest rushed to him, clutching the rosary. "It's a test," he cried. "A trial of faith." But his words rang hollow, swallowed by the hum that grew louder with every second. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The rhythm wasn't outside anymore. It was inside me. In every vein, in every nerve, in every thought. The girl whispered, "Do you hear the voices?" At first, I thought it was her. But then I realized it came from everywhere, from vents, from light fixtures, from the floor beneath us. Not one voice, but thousands, layered and overlapping. Some cried, some laughed, some whispered secrets in tongues I didn't know. I pressed my palms against the floor. It vibrated. It pulsed. The voices climbed up through my arms and into my skull, until I couldn't tell if I was listening or speaking. I looked at the girl. Her eyes were wide, her mouth slightly open, as if she were waiting for something to enter. And then, faintly, through all the noise, I heard my own name. Whispered, repeated, stretched into a chant. My name, multiplied, echoing in voices not my own. I shook my head violently. "No, that's not me." The girl only smiled, sad, tired. "It's already chosen you." Outside, through the cracked hospital windows, I saw the city flicker. The skyscrapers pulsed with light in sync, like neurons firing in one vast brain. Sirens wailed, horns blared, glass shattered, all in rhythm, as if the city had become an orchestra of collapse. And then, silence. Not true silence, but the kind that presses against the skull, so heavy it feels like drowning. Everyone in the hospital froze. Parents held their breath. Nurses lowered their heads. The priest's rosary slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. We waited. And then, from somewhere deep beneath the hospital, a sound rose, not a scream, not a siren, but something older. A voice stretched wide, low and endless, vibrating through the foundation. It spoke no words, yet I understood, it wasn't finished. The girl leaned close, her lips brushing my ear. "This is only the first night." I wanted to tell her she was wrong. I wanted to cling to the last scraps of logic. But when I closed my eyes, I saw the city breathing, saw its arteries glowing with light, saw myself inside it, not a man, but a cell, a fragment of something larger. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to escape. Morning came, though it felt more like a trick than a truth. The hospital's windows glowed with pale daylight, but the light had no warmth. It only illuminated the faces around me, hollow-eyed nurses, parents clutching sleeping children, the priest kneeling motionless beside his rosary. The girl sat against the wall, her head tilted back, her lips moving in a whisper too faint to catch. I stood, legs trembling, and walked toward the doors. No one tried to stop me. They only watched with vacant stares, as if they knew I had to see for myself. Outside, the city seemed still. Too still. The streets were empty except for the remnants of chaos. Overturned cars, shattered glass, papers fluttering in the wind. The neon signs of Times Square blinked weakly, no longer screaming advertisements but pulsing like faint heartbeats. Trash lay scattered in the gutters, unmoving, as though the city had exhaled and refused to breathe again. And yet the silence wasn't silence. It pressed against me, heavy, dense, filled with something unseen. Every footstep I took echoed too long, bouncing between the skyscrapers like a voice in a cavern. My own breath rasped in my ears, faster, sharper, as if it belonged to someone else. I turned down a street and froze. A child's backpack lay in the middle of the road, its zipper open, books spilled onto the asphalt. The pages were blank. Every word, every line had bled away, leaving only empty white. The sight made my stomach lurch, as though language itself had been erased. I kept walking, past a newsstand where newspapers still hung, their headlines frozen on yesterday's hysteria, mystery gas attack. Mass hysteria sweeps Manhattan. Is New York cursed? The ink blurred beneath my eyes, letters melting into unreadable smears. I pressed forward, each block stranger than the last. Shadows moved where no people walked. Windows reflected shapes that didn't match my body. In one glass door, I saw myself doubled, one face looking out, the other looking in, both wearing the same hollow stare. The girl's words haunted me, "It's already chosen you." And she was right. I felt it now, fully. The rhythm had not left. It had only gone quiet, like a beast resting after feeding. It crouched inside my lungs, my veins waiting. I reached the park. The grass was trampled, tents abandoned, the medical vans empty. The barricades still stood, but no police guarded them. In the center of the field lay a dozen pairs of shoes, neatly arranged in a circle, as though their owners had simply stepped out of them and vanished. I stood at the edge, listening. At first, nothing. Only the wind stirring the leaves. But then, faintly, beneath it, I heard breathing. Not mine. Not the city's. Something deeper. 1,000 lungs inhaling in unison, exhaling in unison. As if all who had fallen, all who had screamed, still lingered here, invisible, waiting for the next command. My knees buckled. I pressed my palms to the dirt, heart racing, and in the soil I felt it, the vibration, steady, patient. I don't know how long I knelt there. Minutes, hours, maybe a lifetime. The sky shifted from gray to black, and the first stars blinked through. But I couldn't leave. Because then I heard it. The scream. Not loud, not sudden, but stretched thin across the night like a thread of glass. It seemed to come from everywhere, the skyscrapers, the subways, the river, even from beneath my own ribs. A child's cry, high and endless, echoing through every street. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't matter. The sound was inside me. And in that moment, I understood, it would never stop. Maybe tomorrow the headlines would call it over. Maybe the doctors would claim it was hysteria, a trick of the mind, a passing madness. The streets would fill again, the towers would shine, and the world would pretend to move forward. But I knew better. The city had breathed once. And it would breathe again. The scream was only the beginning. And even now, as I write this, I can still hear it, faint, but growing, carried on the night wind. New York hasn't gone quiet. It's only waiting.